the Iron Man match, the first ever Iron Man match of all time, Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart. Still one of my favorite cage matches of all time. And then you have the Austin versus McMahon match at St. Valentine's Day Massacre back in February of 1999, which featured the debut of Paul White, better known as The Big Show. I could go on for hours talking about some of my favorite steel cage matches. Also Mick Foley and Hunter Hearst Helmsley back in 1997 at the Calgary Stampede pay-per-view. Definitely is included on that list as well. Back in the day, the cage matches were the main events of pay-per-views. When an announcement was made that two wrestlers were going to be competing inside of a steel cage, that was immediately the main event of a pay-per-view. When you found out that Kevin Nash and Bret Hart were going to be feuding over the WWE Championship back in like the late 90s in 1996, that was immediately the main event of a pay-per-view, and it was a match that you had to see. Now, fast forward 20 years later, and steel cage matches are opening up editions of Raw and opening up editions of SmackDown. They're not the main events of pay-per-views anymore. The last time I saw a steel cage match be the main event of a pay-per-view was at the Money in the Bank 2010 pay-per-view that saw John Cena be defeated by then WWE Champion Sheamus. And that was the last time I saw a steel cage match as a main event for a pay-per-view. Never since then have I seen a pay-per-view be main evented by a steel cage match. And I can't remember or recall a time when a pay-per-view was main evented by a steel cage match. Sometimes a Raw or a SmackDown will be main evented by a steel cage match, but it seems like the steel cage matches have gone from main events of pay-per-views and only being used at pay-per-views to matches that open up Raw and open up SmackDown, that are done halfway through the show, that are used to promote mid-card feuds. I'll never forget the steel cage match between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio when SmackDown first moved to Friday nights. That just gives you an idea of how the steel cage match has gone from main eventing pay-per-views to opening up shows and used to promote mid-card talents. It's sad, We used to have the traditional steel cage matches where you'd only win by getting out of the cage or going through the door. Now the rules of the cage match have changed. You can win by pinfall, submission, escaping the cage. You can win the traditional way, or you can obtain a victory by pinning someone or making them submit. Never before, back in the 90s, could you win a steel cage match like that. I think that traditional rules should still apply for a steel cage match, and I know that there's probably going to be a mixed reaction to my opinion on YouTube and our radio forum as it pertains to a steel cage match, because I'm one who believes that traditional rules for a steel cage match, no matter who it's between, should still apply. No matter if it's Bret Hart and Kevin Nash or it's The Miz and John Cena, I think that you should still obtain a victory by escaping the cage and not by pinfall or submission. Now, every once in a while, they'll still have traditional steel cage match rule matches, but not enough. Every once in a while they'll say the only way you can win this match is by escaping the cage. But more often you see the rules of pinfall and submission pertaining to a steel cage match. And I think that's the wrong way to go about doing it. I think that people like Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy have an absolute right to be disgusted with how WWE have modified the cage. I remember the cage being just a blue cage that you had to escape, and now they've changed it up. They've put holes in the cage to make it easier to climb. They've modified the rules, and they've significantly changed the steel cage match to a point where you don't care if there's a steel cage match on a show or not. They take the cage on tour with them. Sometimes on tour a cage match is the main event, which is a special thing to see and a treat for fans who attend live shows. But it's not what I remember seeing. The cage has really gone under a significant amount of modification and changes. The cage match used to be the main event of pay-per-views. I mean, back in the 80s, if you'd see Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy main event something like WrestleMania inside of a steel cage, that was a must-see. But now, what we're seeing now is the cage match has gone from main eventing pay-per-views to opening up shows, and that's a severe change and something to take into consideration when listening to this week's audio commentary, how the steel cage match has gone from a significant match of pure dominance and violence to now a match that's basically a joke and made a mockery of. I mean, I remember, if you want to go completely retro, I remember seeing a steel cage match video game on Game Boy that was absolutely fun to play. And now the cage matches have gone from, being the title of video games to absolute mockeries, and I think it's absolutely pathetic. And now they've even gotten so desperate that they're throwing female talents inside of cage matches. I mean, how much more disrespect does the steel cage match need to be shown? And I hope that when the DVD is released, the history of the steel cage match, one thing it documents is, yes, the many memorable cage matches we saw back in the 80s and 90s, but I hope one crucial point that the DVD gets across is how the cage match has undergone so many significant changes. It has gone from main eventing pay-per-views to opening up shows. It's gone from a match that had the only way of winning to go over the top of the cage or through the door to a match where pinfalls and submissions apply. They've even gotten as desperate as to change the format of the match. Sometimes the cages have roofs on them now, which is something I didn't include with this week's audio commentary. How pathetic is that? There used to be a way of getting out of the cage by going over the top. Now they have roofed cages, which is absolutely pathetic. I don't think a roof has any place in a steel cage match, especially when back in the 80s, one of the means of winning was by going over the top of the cage and having both of your feet hit the floor, which is pathetic. I mean, that's one thing that I hope the cage matches, or the steel cage match DVD gets across, is the fact that now we're having roofed cage matches. And one thing that you need to pay attention to when you're watching this DVD, or if you go out and actually purchase the DVD, I hope you don't go that far, because I really think that DVD is not really going to be worth that much when I really sit down and think about it. $30 or $40 is not worth sacrificing for a steel cage DVD, especially when you can see all the matches that are included on the DVD by looking through the list available on ProWrestling.com, on YouTube, Google Video, or AL Video, three of the top video sources on the internet. I hope they really get across these crucial points, and one thing that I hope you pay attention to when you're watching it and reviewing it for yourself are some of the matches that are included have cage matches that have roofs on them. Some of the matches that are included have matches that have different rules. Some of the matches that are included feature traditional rules and traditional cages. And one thing I hope you pay attention to is how the cage has undergone so many modification and changes through the years, and they are changes, to be frankly honest with you, that make me sick to my stomach, that don't make me care about a cage match as much as I did 20 years ago, and they're changes that make me not pay attention to cage matches as much as I used to. The significance of a cage match is sickening now, and it's terrible. Ladder matches used to be something that I used to love to watch. Now ladder matches are being used on every show. They're being attached to gimmick pay-per-views, and it's just pathetic. The first ladder match took place in March or April of 1994 between Scott Hall and Shawn Michaels, who really set the bar for ladder matches, and now ladder matches and cage matches are being made mockeries of. This TLC pay-per-view turns my stomach. The Money in the Bank pay-per-view is a mockery of ladder matches. Definitely the Money in the Bank contract is a modification ladder matches undergone, but it's not something that interests me. Back in the early 90s, cage matches and ladder matches, as I said, had some significance attached to them and related to them, but now what we're seeing now done on WWE programming is absolutely sickening, and I hope the DVD, the history of the steel cage, gets those points across, and if it doesn't, then the steel cage DVD proves no point and has no magnificence for being released. And one thing that I want to get across to the listening audience are these crucial points, and this is the purpose for doing this week's audio commentary, and I hope that that's something that you take into consideration, some of these points, when you try to decipher whether or not to purchase the history of the steel cage. The cover of the DVD looks cool. Some vintage superstars and some current superstars are included on the cover. The design of the DVD is phenomenal. I will give WWE creative props for doing that, and WWE Home Video for actually making it. Back when I used to watch steel cage matches, actually Coliseum Home Video used to produce it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a vintage VHS tape that takes a look at some of the top steel cage matches of all time. I'm pretty sure there is, but we've come a long way from the days of VHS. There are now Blu-rays released, which are basically DVDs with more storage space and improved graphics and a blue protective layering. We've come a long way from, VHS releases that were released by Coliseum Home Video. Now Coliseum Home Video wants nothing to do with WWE. I'm not even sure if Coliseum Home Video are still in existence. Since then, WWE have released their own home video production company, their own home video production branch, if you want to call it that. And cage matches have really come a long way, and they've gone under a significant amount of modification and changes, and now we're seeing them won by superstars like John Cena. So we've gone from Hulkamania running wild at the top of the steel cage and ripping the yellow shirt apart to John Cena ripping off his "You Can't See Me" t-shirt and standing tall with victories inside of steel cage matches. In terms of vintage steel cage matches, definitely some of my favorites were Bret Hart versus Owen Hart from SummerSlam '94, Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, and some of my recent favorite steel cage matches have to have been steel cage matches that included John Cena and John Morrison. John Cena, The Miz, and John Morrison was one of my favorite matches to see. Anytime, women would step inside of the steel cage back in 2001, 2002, Lita and Victoria really ripped it up, and